Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Boris Effects. Excited to talk about particle illusion today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're going to have a fun one today. We have Professor John Dickinson is with us. He's going to show us all about the new Particle Illusion Standalone free app, which we released last week. So hopefully everyone there has gone out and grabbed your free Particle Illusion Standalone application. Also joining John in the forums today is Alan Lawrence, the founder of WonderTouch and the creator of Particle Illusion. He is going to be in the forums answering everyone's questions. So we have an all-star team together today to talk about all things Particle Illusion. Let's see if I can advance the slides here. Today we're going to be looking at the interface and controls of PI. We're going to look at how we can modify presets, looking at force and deflectors, looking at rendering and compositing. John has created an awesome comp that he's going to share with you in a couple minutes and kind of walk through how we created that in PI. Like I said, your questions will be answered live in the forums by Alan and myself. So simply type in your question, hit send, and we will answer them the best we can. Thank you so much to our sponsors, NVIDIA, Dell, and Intel. The Dell Precision Workstations, pretty cool things, what we use here at Boris Effects. They just updated their laptops. Have to point out, man, the new Precision 5750, it is a 17-inch laptop under 5 pounds with an RTX 300 card in it. So pretty badass workstations, pro workstations, great to use. Congrats to those friends at Dell for coming out with some awesome new tech. Doing things a little differently with this webinar. I wanted to talk a little bit about particle illusion at the start and just kind of, I won't go through all these points, but just wanted to kind of tell you what PI is. It is a really cool, fast and easy 2D particle generator available in 2 versions, the plugin and the standalone. It ships with over 3,000 preset emitters, has tons of features. It's really a full-fledged professional graphics and VFX particle system. And like I said, the standalone version is free. So you can download that for Windows or Mac. Right now, all you have to do is log into boriseffects.com and grab it, and you can be using PI at home for free. The big difference between the plugin version and the standalone is that the plugin version allows you to composite your video right inside a host application like After Effects or Resolve or pretty much anything out there. And there are some other added features like the plugin version of Particle Illusion in Continuum, has some Mocha tracking involved in it, so you can track your particles and a few other features as well. So always want to point out Particle Illusion is a fully supported application. It's not like we released the free version and we're going to put it on a shelf and leave it to die. We'll continue to develop that and add new features as we move forward. We have a ton of free online training to get you up to speed on PI. So if you go to the Boris Effects Particle Illusion page and click in the menu bar, the Learn section, you'll see our friend Ben Brownlee and John Dickinson both created over 20, I think, up there, 18 to 20 different videos, all to get you started and that you can learn your own pace. And if, as you're learning PI, you do have technical support questions and you want to kind of ask, what's going on, feel free to post in the Boris Effects forums. That's the best place to get your questions answered. So if you go to the Boris Effects page, click on support in the menu bar, and then click on forums, you'll see there's a nice Particle Illusion forum, and there you can ask all your questions. So last slide here, just wanted to point out, like the plugin version of PI can be purchased as part of Continuum, right? The full suite. It can be purchased as part of the Continuum Particles unit, or it could be as a standalone premium filter. So if you do want to get the paid plugin, that's the 3 ways you can get it. Monthly subscriptions are now available for all Boris Effects products. So a subscription for the full Continuum suite for Adobe is $37 per month. That's a really fantastic deal. So go ahead and if you've ever had any hesitation about trying out any of our products, definitely the kind of easiest entry point now on your pocketbook is a monthly subscription. Sapphire, Continuum, Mocha Pro, and Silhouette are all available for monthly subscriptions, and also multi-product bundles are available. All right, without further ado, let's bring on John Dickinson and let's talk about some particle illusion. John, hello, my friend.
Hello, hello. Let me just share my screen.
Sure.
Thanks for that introduction, Brian. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can. Looks great.
If you can, you should be seeing some awesome graphics. Always great to be here. Lovely to to get up early here in Sydney, Australia, and present to you around the world. Today we're going to be talking, as Brian mentioned, about particle illusion. And it says introduction to particle illusion, but I could easily just bore you just with the basics, but I'm a motion graphic designer and I always want to go in and use the software and build something, create something and show you how I built it. And that's what I've done today. If you want to learn all of the basics, as Brian mentioned, you can check out the tutorials that Ben Brownlee and myself have already recorded that cover everything. So you'll be in good stead if you want to just learn the basics. But today we're going to talk about actually building something. And this is what I built in After Effects using Particle Illusion Standalone and saving that project and then taking that across to Particle Illusion plugin version in After Effects and using one of the features in there and then comping everything together. And there's no footage in here. This is just made from some text and particles. So let's jump in. I'm going to whip across to Particle Illusion first and just show you how I sort of set up all the main particles. I'll just tab across to that. Okay, so here I have Particle Illusion Standalone launched. So I'm not going to walk through this step by step, but I will show you some of the things from the initial setup step by step. So starting with a blank screen in Particle Illusion, let me just see if I can get this. I'm working at 1920 by 1080, so the screen's bigger for you. Normally I would have much higher resolution. So in Particle Illusion, you really want to start with the presets because there's so many presets and they're such a great time saver. You can start from very, very, very basic particle emitters and build up from there. And I do have a tutorial in the tutorial series that shows you how to build a look using a basic particle. And there's reasons why you want to do that as well. It can simplify the process somewhat. But most of the time, you probably want to start with a preset. And there's so many presets to choose from. So the first one that I looked at when I was developing this look was one called Atomizer. I'm just typing that in down here in the preset search box. And you can see it's this one here, Atomizer 2. So if I select that, you can see I get a preview here and I can stop or play that preview. And to add that to my stage over here on the right, I just double click. So when I do that, it adds the emitter to the stage. And you can see over here in controls view, here are the parameters and properties that you can adjust. If I press the play button down here in graph view, you can see that plays back. I can just use my mouse wheel just to roll in. Just happen to be using a mouse here. So that's a good start. Let's add something to that as well. Let's see. So the one I want to look at now is one called New Tunnel, if I can spell. New Tunnel 01. And this is nice and fast, so it's really easy to experiment. You can add things to the stage, check them out, delete them until you come up with something you like. And I kind of like this one because it was also kind of a circular look and it really enhanced the atomizer somewhat, but I thought it was a little bit strong. So you can see when I added it to the stage, it added it above the atomizer. You can see it's named here. And down here in the emitter properties, there's an opacity setting. So I'm just going to drop that down to about 60. So that makes it a little less bright. And let me just check and see if I've got them both starting at 0 seconds. Yep. You can see down here in the timeline, when I added it to the stage, both of these emitters started at 0. And that's because I have a setting set up in my preferences. It's this one here. Where is it? Add new projects at frame 0. And this is not on by default. So when you first start using Particle Illusion, I suggest that you actually add that, check that on, because it can be a bit annoying when you're moving around the timeline and then you add a new emitter and it will add it at that time if you don't have that preference checked. So it's just a personal preference of mine. So that's the first two emitters. And still developing the look, I wanted to add some particles that are sort of moving around this vortex. So once again, come down to the presets. And this one, I found this one, Sparky Clouds. And I'd never touched sparky clouds before. I'd never even knew it existed. I just searched through the presets and found this one, and I thought this one looks quite useful. There's probably thousands of presets I haven't actually used. If I click play, you can see it's got these nice smoky particles, and they kind of look like embers. I'm not really interested in the smoke, but I just wanted to sort of fill my frame up with sort of randomly moving particles, and I could set that up manually, but it's much easier to use a preset. So if I just double click that, that's going to add that to the stage again. You can see this is actually an area emitter. If I come up into the controls view and just twirl down the properties, you can see that the shape is set to area, and that's fine, but it's a little small. So I want to click on it and just scale it up. It doesn't have to be the full size of my work area, which is 1920 by 1080. You can see up here on the top right. That's pretty good, but I don't want the smoke. And this is actually what's called a super emitter. If I just twirl this other guy up, I just want to tidy up this stage, tidy up the controls view. So sparky clouds is actually called a super emitter, and a super emitter is basically an emitter that emits other emitters. So you can see down here, if I twirl down spark clouds, it has this letter at the beginning of each of the words, F, it precedes the words. And this represents a free emitter. That's the terminology. Let's think of it as a sub-emitter. So this emitter is emitting emitters, which in turn are emitting particles. And I explained that in the Understanding Super Emitters tutorial. So we won't actually go into super emitters at the moment, but just know that you can make more complex, detailed looks and more intricate particle simulations using super emitters. Down here, I just want to turn off clouds. I just don't want these clouds. So I'm just going to disable them, just like that. So that's nice. They've got them just sort of floating around in the scene, and just with 3 presets, I'm starting to get something that looks fairly balanced. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to add a force to the scene. So I just twirl this up and come up to the force button and click, and then just click in my scene. And you might have just noticed that when I added that force, that some of the particles started to move. Now I want to get this centered, so I'm going to change position X, Y to 0, 0. 0, 0. And let's just increase the strength. I'm just going to click off and click back on it again. There we go. And just drag that, increase that. And look how it starts to push the particles in the direction of the arrow. Forces are really handy. Now I don't want to do that because it's changing how that atomizer is supposed to look. So I'm going to change that force type from area to point. And a point emitter is a little different. A point emitter will sort of suck particles in to the center point. If I click on the heads-up display, I can change the radius. You see, as I do that, the particles start to move. Because the center point is on the atomizer and the tunnel, it doesn't actually affect those particles, which is really handy. So I don't have to sort of try and isolate the force, but it is affecting these particles here. And I think that's probably because, Alan, you'll probably be able to clarify this, but the central area here is the minimum distance, and anything inside the minimum distance isn't affected by the force. And because the emitters for the atomizer and the tunnel emit from that central point, then they're not affected by that force. So I think that's why that's doing that. But I don't want those affected anyway, so that's great. I want these particles affected, but I don't want them to be sucked in towards the center of the force. I want them to be repelled or repulsed by this, this tunnel that we've made. So I'm going to change the strength from 100. I'm going to drag that down into a negative value. And watch what happens to the particles in the stage. Bring that down quite dramatically. I don't want really anything to enter. You shall not pass, right? These particles can't get in. So if I play that back now, it's now at minus 3,000 something. So if I play that back, watch what happens to those particles. They try to get in, but they can't. They're kind of propelled outwards. So it's kind of contradicting the movement of the tunnel. The tunnel appears to be sort of sucking, but those particles appear to be repelled, which is really nice. And it's nice to be able to use a force without having to use any keyframes to get this really sort of organic look. So I like that. I'm going to now change it up. I'm going to duplicate Sparky Clouds. I'm going to rename it too, because the more presets you have in here, the more difficult it can be to see what's going on. So I'm just going to select Sparky Clouds and rename that. I like to use capital letters. So this one is deflected or repelled. I'm going to say repelled particles. Particles, like that. And now I'm going to duplicate that. So just right-clicking and choosing duplicate emitter. And the new one's added to the top. I'm going to rename this, let's see, rename. And this one's going to have them sucked in. So this is going to be attracted particles. Attracted particles. I mean, it doesn't matter what piece of software you're using. It's really important to stay organized, right? And I do a lot of 3D modeling, and I've got thousands of objects in my scene. If you didn't name them, you just be, have one hand tied behind your back. I can leave new tunnel like that. I can leave atomizer like that because they're obviously what they are. So I'm going to, just for the moment, I'm going to disable repelled particles just by choosing disable. And just while I'm at it, I'm going to save this by choosing File, Save Project. And let's see, I'm not going to call it Atomo1, I'll call it Atomo2 because I've already set up the project when I was setting this whole thing up, when I was creating the look. So I'll save that. Good idea to do that as you're working. Click on Attracted Particles and just going to make some modifications. I don't want as many attracted particles. So I'm going to just do a few modifications up here to the emitter properties. And most of these emitter properties are kind of like a scaling factor for the free emitter, and in this case, the free emitter and the particle properties. These kind of scale these values down here, which are in free emitter and particles. I could go in and change the free emitter values and also the particle values, but it's really nice to be able to just make modifications up here. So I'm going to increase the size, and I'm going to decrease the number. Just bring this right down. And then, but these are free emitters, so each emitter is like a clump of particles. If I bring that right down, you can see there's just, what, 4. There's 2, and 1 we can't even see. It's probably off the frame. So I want not too many, maybe, I don't know, something like that. I want them bigger, like this. If I press play, they're going to be repelled because they're being repelled by that same force. So I'm going to just duplicate this force, and I'm going to rename the bottom one. Let's see, rename. What did we call it? We called it repeller, if that's actually a word. Repel force, that's better. And I'm going to disable that one. And for this one, I'm going to rename it attract force. Attract force. Okay. All right. And this one, I'm going to increase the strength. So we want these ones to be sucked in. But not only sucked in, if I bring this really high, they're going to be sucked in and they're going to be spat out the other side. Let's just keep going. And you can start to see them move out the other side. Just play that back. So as they get sucked in, they get shot out. You can see they're starting to get shot out. So these ones are special particles. These are the ones that they do get affected by this vortex, so they're being sucked in and pushed out. But I want them to be pushed out with even greater velocity. And you can see I'm just dragging values and just previewing this. I can even leave it playing while I'm dragging the values. You see it's quite responsive. Just keep dragging that. So that's looking pretty good. It'd be nice if there was a little bit of motion blur on these ones. So if I just toggle motion blur on, let's see. We're not really seeing it in these ones because they're not moving very fast, but you will see it on the ones that are shot out. You can see them down here, ones at the bottom. So if I press play, they get shot out like bullets. Let's maybe just add a few more. So we just add a couple more in there. There we go. We can really start to see them being shot out now. Boom, like that. So they're being sucked in, and the other ones are going to be repelled, but I can't have them both on at the same time because they'll be contradicting each other. So I'm going to render these out independently. So I'll have the attract particles and the attracting force. I'll render that out separately. And the repel particles and the repelling force, render that out separately. Then I can comp it up in After Effects. Okay. The only thing I want to do for these attracted particles is just change their color. So I know I've got attracted particles open, and this is where naming is really important. So if I just tool open Spark Clouds, come down the bottom, you can see there's lots of parameters, and tool open Sparks. So here I am in the particle now, and particles have properties where you can change the appearance and do things like change the shape image. There's lots of different images you can choose from and upload your own. I was experimenting with Cinema 4D 3D objects the other day, just rendering out some objects from Cinema 4D, quite large, and they came in really well. It looked really good. Save that for another time. I'm just going to tool open colors, click on the gradient here, just bring this all the way to the end, double click the first knot here, and just make that blue. I call them knots, probably because that's what they're called in Cinema 4D, but they're also called stops, and make that light blue. And you can see how my particles have changed color in the scene. So I'm just going to click apply. These ones are going to be pulled in, just like that. And I'm not so concerned that they're not bright on top of this one here, because I'm going to use blend modes in After Effects to blend these a little better. So as I mentioned, once these are all set up, you need to render them out. And I just remember there's one more thing I want to add. It's some smoke, because I want to comp some smoke in there as well. And this one is called Smoky Turmoil. Let's see if I can spell. Smoky Turmoil, this one here. So once again, I'm going to double click just to add that. Now I could create something like this in After Effects using fractal noise, which is pretty straightforward, but this is really easy to do as well. Just grab this that's already animated, scale it up to fit the comp size. Actually, that's not the one I want. I want to get the other one. It's a little darker. This one here. Just double click, scale it up, and just render it out. Oops, wrong one. Make sure I select the right one, Smoky Turmoil. Scale that up. And I'm going to leave that as it is, basically, and just, I don't want, I wouldn't want it to be affected by the force, so I'd have to disable that, not duplicate it. Try that again, disable, and that won't be affected. And that's just literally rendered out just like that. You can see it's just evolving a little bit, moving around a little bit, just going to add some smokiness in After Effects. So once again, just soloing each of the individual passes that I wanted to render out. And there isn't actually currently any way to sort of solo where I can just, very quickly turn solo one emitter and have the others not render out, but that's definitely something to look at for a new feature, Alan, because we have to currently come in at the moment and just disable things individually, which isn't too bad, but it'd be nice to have something to solo that. And once you've got it set up, just clicking on the render button up at the top and opening up the render and export settings and finding setting an output location, choosing maybe one of the presets. ProRes is the champ in here. And if I wanted to use an alpha channel, I could use 444 with pre-multiplied or straight alpha, and just render that out and comp it up in After Effects. So I'm not going to render that out now because I've already rendered them. So let's shoot across to After Effects and have some fun with these rendered objects. I'll just take a quick sip of my tea. Of course, we drink tea in the morning in Australia. I'll have my coffee later. That'll be my reward. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and you can see, if I just press the space bar, you can see some of those elements that we've got. Let's walk through this comp by comp. The final comp, if I just open this up, number 6. This is the main comp. There's all the layers that are used to create this look, but I love to break things down into separate compositions, not because that's the way I would work in After Effects, but it's just a really nice way to present to you, so you can see very clearly the building blocks and my thought processes as I was building this. So they're all rendered out. If I come into my source folder, and you can see I'm nicely organized in here in footage under pre-renders. Not perfectly organized. Attracted sparks shouldn't be in there as a comp. There's all my different renders. So I've got my atomizer, I've got my attracted sparks, my repelled sparks. I've actually even turned off some of the elements for the atomizer and just kept this electricity because I needed it to sort of comp it back on top. And you can see it does have a nice clean alpha channel because that was rendered out to straight. And the smoke and the tunnel, that's all been rendered out of Particle Illusion Standalone. Let's just close the footage window here and turn these on. So there's the atomizer and there's the tunnel. I haven't done anything to them other than drop them into a composition. All fully animated from Particle Illusion Standalone. So that's looking really good. So the next thing to do was add the particles, the ones that are surrounding these two objects. So just come back up to O2. The first one is the repelled particles. There they are here. Let's just preview that. You can see as they sort of come close, they get pushed away. That's all just rendered directly out of Particle Illusion. We're going to modify these in just a moment. And there's also the attracted sparks. I call them sparks here, but I call them particles in the other one. Same thing. You can see as these ones come close, they get shot through. I'm just going to turn on the proxy. I just rendered a full resolution proxy so we can preview this quickly. So it's quite a nice, interesting look where you've got some of them being pushed away and some of them being attracted. But I wanted the golden particles, the repelled particles, to also be affected by the text because I had the A, the T, and the M in here. And I wanted those to be affected by the text as well. And while I could do that in Particle Illusion Standalone, the difference is that Particle Illusion Standalone doesn't allow me to import an image to use as a reference. So I'd be guessing where the A, the T, and the M were in the frame while I was creating my deflectors. But in the plugin version, I can use a layer as a reference. So it's very, very easy to place them. So let's come into number 3. And just going to double click this composition here, ATM with black. So there's my A, my T, and my M. And I've actually added a little bit of flicker to these. You can see that they're sort of flickering on and off. We can talk about that in a moment. And let's go Shift Escape. Will take me back to the previous comp. And in here, I've added a mask. You can see there's a black solid at the bottom. I've just masked those off because I wanted those letters to be kind of, sort of fading off into darkness in the main composition. Just did that using a mask. And I just added a bit of BCC Gaussian blur just to soften it a bit. Without that, the text looks super, super sharp. And that's not what I wanted. So a little bit of blur. So that's the A, the T, and the M, how they were treated. So if I come back to number 3, and see, I've got that turned on now. So I want the repelled particles to be repelled by the letters as well. So what I need to do is I need to use particle illusion inside of After Effects to use the plug-in version. You can see I've already got it applied to this layer over here in the effect control panel. I just turn it on. It's part of the particle group in Particle Illusion, in Continuum, BCC particles. You can see there's a number of different particle generators, and there's Particle Illusion right there. So let me just launch Particle Illusion just by clicking on that button. I might need to just pull it across my screen. Yeah, it's come across on my right-hand side screen. I'm surrounded by screens here. Let me just make that a little smaller. Let's just bring that right down. Okay, so it's exactly the same as a standalone in appearance. I'm going to, let's see, come up to my view menu and let's try edit. There we go. So you can see I've already got the A and the T deflectors in place, because what's happening is these particles are going to be deflected. And if I come up to my preview background and choose composite over source video, let's see, make sure that I've got to make sure that's turned on, source frame. Okay, to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to click apply just for a moment, check everything's right in After Effects. I want to be able to see those letters. I'm going to turn all this off. That's all good, should be able to see that. So come back into Particle Illusion. And yay, it's opened up on the other screen again. Let's just bring that across. I think that's actually been filed, Alan, that one. Let's see. So it's on black, on checkerboard, over source frame, over source video. Why am I not seeing those letters? Let's see. Oh, there we go, because they haven't faded up yet. I actually set, I hadn't done anything wrong at all, but one thing I didn't mention with the letters is I actually faded them up from black or from transparent at the beginning. So we're not seeing them at the beginning of the animation because they're invisible. So silly me, I forgot to mention those keyframes. So now that I can see them, you can see I've actually added deflectors around the A and the T. Let's add one around the M. At the moment, the particles, if I just press play and make sure motion blur is off, you can see how the particles are sort of grouping around the side of the A there. And they're interacting with that letter because there's a deflector around that letter. But with the M, they're just moving, across behind because there is no deflector. So let's just add a deflector for the M. So to do that, I'm going to bring that back to 300. Click on deflector, and then just click in the scene. So I click and just create it. So I'm clicking, and watch how the particles get affected by that deflector as more and more edges are added. So deflectors don't actually push particles, not like forces do, but particles can bounce off them, and it allows you to create some really nice looks. I'm just going to keep clicking till I get to the last point, and then double click just to close that. You can also press escape, and it has been added at 0 seconds. So now So now you can see those particles are being deflected by that deflector, which is around the M.
Hey, John, do you mind if I jump in? Why don't you try switching mics? I'm getting some feedback on my end.
Sure.
Sorry, everybody. We're trying to figure out this microphones on GoToWebinar here, but we discovered last night that if John switched mics halfway through, the static mysteriously goes away.
Yeah, I've got this really expensive mic, which sounds great, but for some reason on this particular service, it gives us some clicking. That one. Just give me one moment.
Sure. Thanks so much for everyone's questions. Fast and furious going on in the forum. So great job, Alan, keeping up with everyone's questions.
Excellent. Okay, can you hear that? How's that?
Yep. It's like I said.
Yep. You can hear that now.
Yep. Sound great. Thank you, John.
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. That's why it always pays to set up the day before, right, Brian? Okay. So let's see. Where were we? Deflector around the M. And remember, I wasn't able to do this in standalone because I couldn't see the A, the T, and the M because I can't import. I can't view the video, the image, the particles over a source frame or source video, but I can in the plugin version, which is great. So let me just now come down to just hide my bar here and come down and hit apply. And I'm going to just switch on my proxy again because I've already rendered this. And this is where we are so far. So the A, the T, and the M just fade up, and they're being affected by, they're affecting the particles, the golden particles, the repelled particles. And you can see I actually have got motion blur turned on. So the particles are being affected by motion blur. And the blue particles are being attracted. So the particles are pretty much done. Let's just move on to number 4. So in here, I wanted to start playing around with the color because this is it's very nice, but it's a little bit drab, a little bit plain. So I like to play around with gradients when I'm doing color. You can see here I've used just click on it. I've just used a gradient ramp, After Effects gradient ramp, just this bright orange, but I've just added a little bit of black at the start color. You see I can just drag that across and change that position. That way the orange isn't affecting the central part of my atomizer because I want this to be blue. Because remember, this is sucking in the blue particles. And there's something I thought of as I was doing it. Okay, so if this is sucking in blue particles, then surely these little guys in the middle, they'd be blue. And because they're blue, that's why they're sucking in blue particles. So I was thinking very seriously about why this would be doing what it was doing. It kind of made sense. So the blue one is this one here. This is just, let's just follow this. This is just another gradient ramp, just from a sort of a bright blue to a light blue to a dark blue. And that's in the central area. So that on top of these guys makes this a little bluer. And let me turn all of these on. We get that. So we've got this, let's see. For some reason this one isn't colorizing this. I've used a soft light blend mode. I think I know why. Let me just come back into my ATM with black. That's why I had the black solid in the background. Watch what happens if I turn that on. Come back to here. There we go. That can be a bit of a gotcha when you're working in After Effects. You're trying to colorize something and go, why isn't it working? Because if there's an alpha channel, it doesn't work as expected. So sometimes you need to put a solid behind things. I'm just amazed that I actually remembered that. So look, we've got that really rich orange now, which is starting to look a lot better. Let me just activate that proxy. So it's looking a lot more fiery. So that's really all I did, was just to add the color to it, was just use a couple of gradients. You can see for the blue one, I've used the hue blend mode. And for the orange one, I've used the soft light blend mode. So using gradients like that and just playing around with the different blend modes, really nice way to colorize your layers. And I've been doing that for years. Okay, so let's move on to the next stage. So really from here, it's just, tweaking and enhancing and refining. Usually in any of my projects, I often take it too far and then I delete layers because, an earlier version was probably better. And I play around with a lot of different things, with glows, with lens flares, all kinds of things to sort of enhance it and sort of finish the look. In this case, I've used an adjustment layer, and I've used BCC Fast Film Glow. It's a really nice, beautiful filmic glow. I just turn that on, and there we go. So we've got this really lovely glow, and of course I can adjust the threshold of that to control how much of the particles of the pixels get affected. So we're getting a lot more around here in the middle. So fast film glow, sort of like a standard thing for me when I'm using BCC. And also this smoke layer. Let me just solo this. This was the smoke layer that we just rendered out, or I rendered out earlier, the one that we just created. You can see it's this one here. And it's only very subtle, and I've used a mask around it just to sort of mask it around this area. And you can't really, you can only just see it if I turn it on and off. Just look around here. So it just adds a little bit of smokiness. It was looking at this point here when I didn't have this, it was looking just a little black. It was all looking so black. And I wanted to think that maybe this vortex, this atomizer is sort of, it's got a smoky glow around it, and it does two things. It makes it look a little more interesting, but also adds a little more color. And so just by sticking that in there, just turn that on, I can just adjust the opacity slightly. Too much, and you start to go to that sort of thing, and that might be your thing, but for me that was too much. I just wanted a little touch, and it just adds a little bit of that fractally smoke around these areas like that. See the difference? Especially over here, this area in here. Let me just zoom right in. You can really see that sort of smokiness. A little often goes a long way. So that's without, and that's with. That's really nice. And remember, that's already animating because the particles are animating. So it's giving us that real sort of hit of smokiness. And you can see I've just used a mask just to control where that is in the scene. Because up here, it actually sort of starts to flatten everything out. If there's too much there, the look starts to look a little flat. But here we've got like sort of infinite space. So that's that was the next stage. Let me just make that full frame. Just hit the space bar. And it's starting to look pretty nice. You've got that sort of smokiness moving around. The particles are interacting with the letters. You've got all of this atoms and electricity and all this stuff going on from the particle illusion. Those blue ones are being sucked in and shot out, which is really nice. It's got a surprising amount of depth for something that's completely 2D. Let's move on to number 6. And like I said, as I mentioned, this is just sort of refining and just getting the look sort of finalized. I've used, I wanted some sort of lens flare-ish, but sort of lighting effect on this, and some sort of chromatic aberration. And I was playing around with BCC Prism. Let me just turn off tritone. BCC Prism, which is kind of it splits into the layer into RGB. Just turn that on. This is an adjustment layer. Let me just turn that on. You can see it gives a kind of swirly, sort of spacey look to it. And I was adjusting the start angle I've added a keyframe for that. If I just press U, you can see there's a keyframe for starting angle. I'm just going to turn that off and just drag that value randomly. And this is what I was doing. I was literally, I applied it and I was just dragging values to see what it would do. And when I changed this starting angle, you see it sort of twirled. If I make it 0, this is what the default looks like. And I think that's, if I go to 90, yeah, 90 just gives me sort of a streaky, sort of a straight on sort of directional blur. So I think actually 90 is the default, but by changing the angle, not only did it sort of twirl that around, let's say some sort of aurora borealis or some sort of whatever those things the sun spits out. I can't remember what they're called, but the heat is sort of being shot out from this this central area. But it's also giving me this area around the edge, which is really nice. You can see this light around the edge, almost like this is being looked at through a lens. And that's a nice frame, isn't it? And I thought that was a really nice look, but I was starting to lose some of this electricity, and that's where I rendered out that particle separately, that one there, and just comp that on top. You can see if I just turn it on and off, because I'm using different blend modes, and you start to lose some of that detail. So I've just rendered that out of the standalone, just comp that back on top, because I didn't want to lose that, that electricity in there. And I also made that blue. And just added a bit of gradient ramp in the background, just to add a little bit more blue, just with a soft mask. And this is very subtle, but it just makes that a little bit more blue around the edges. Let's just turn that on and off. See that? There really isn't any pure black in here. I don't really like pure black in this case. Let me just turn on the proxy and let's have a look at how this looks moving. So once again, just pressing 0 to preview. See how we're getting this flicker down here in the bottom left? Isn't that nice? It's because of Prism. And because I'm animating the starting point for Prism, it's giving me, it's actually moving. This sort of streaky light is moving. I thought that's really nice, interesting look, and just really just drop the plugin on BCC Prism and just played around with it. And last but not least, I'd already finished writing this presentation, and I opened it up again yesterday morning, and I thought, I always get sucked in. What else can I add? You know, I put it down and I'm finished and I'm ready to go. I thought, maybe, you know, when you come back to something and you look at it with fresh eyes and you think, maybe you could use a little bit of this. So I did add a couple of things in here. One of them was inside the text. I know I mentioned before that I've actually used an effect in here. This is actually Sapphire. This is using, which is another Boris product, Boris Effects product, Sapphire Flicker. If I just press 0, you can see how this is flickering on and off. And you can do this a few ways in After Effects. I could even do it manually using, you know, opacity and wiggle. For flicker's great, just drop it on, boom, and just change the amplitude. Gives me a nice flicker effect. So I thought that looks actually pretty good in the final comp, because the text is flickering. So look out for that in a moment. When I preview this, let's just turn off the proxy. So we've got, let's see, we've got, there's our number 6, that's our base. We've got the flickering text in there, which we'll look at in a moment. I also like to add some sort of depth, more depth where I can to my projects. And I've got all these particles here, so I thought, why not just duplicate one of them? This is the repelled ones, and just add a bit of BCC fast lens blur and a bit of levels, and just bring those into the foreground. They are very subtle. Let me just solo them. You can see them down here. Very subtle. Let me just play with the, it's not the opacity. I'll just leave them like that. But if I just move in the timeline, you can see I've got BCC lens blur applied, and it's just giving me that kind of bokeh effect as if they're in the foreground. So without having to, go and render more particles out. I just duplicated the particles I already had, and then just put those on top. Added BCC fast lens blur, which is a nice fast lens blur effect, and that just gives me an extra level of depth. And the last thing was, I thought, well, it could use a sort of lens flare in the center here, because you've got this bright hot spot. And I was playing around with BCC lens flare, and I was playing around with sapphire lens flare, and they're beautiful lens flare generators, but I wasn't able to get sort of the effect where the brightness was affecting the flare. So I actually made one manually just by using directional blur. We just solo those. You can see here I've got a couple of things going on. I'll just turn one of these off. I've got sapphire hotspots, which is a great effect for making things black and white. So I just turn sapphire hotspots on, it goes boom, and just gives me the very, very, very brightest area. And then I just use BCC directional blur just to blur that out. And because, of course, it's based on, the hotspot is based on the brightest pixels, as I move the time indicator, you can see as there's more pixels, you get a bigger blur, you get a longer blur, brighter blur. And as there's less, you get less. So it feels like it's reacting to the brightness, the flare, in inverted commas, is reacting to the brightness of the central point, the nucleus, if you like. And I just added one for sort of slightly thicker area, and one for a slightly longer area, just to get a bit of variation there. So it's kind of like that lens flare streak that you sometimes see. So let's just turn all this back on, and just keep an eye on here for the flickering text, because this is all flickering, right? So it's quite nice. I've masked the text off so it's in darkness. It's quite nice that this area is kind of flickering, because it feels like it's being affected by the light being generated by the central particles here. And look out for the the lens flare as well. Just press 0. So we get that look, which is really nice. That flicker is really pretty. And that's the finished look. So I've used Particle Illusion Standalone without After Effects even active to develop my look and render all those layers out. It doesn't have to be After Effects. You can comp it up in whatever you use. Bring them across to your compositor, and then just use the power of those tools to finish the composition. In my case, I've used some After Effects effects, default effects, standard effects, and I've used a bunch of different BCC effects and sapphire effects, which is the ones I obviously turn to first. There's so much choice in there. And that's the finished look.
So once again, thank you to John Dickinson. Great job as always, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.
And thank you to Alan answering all the questions in the forum, and Jesse for organizing. Till next time, we'll see everyone later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.